and welcome to another episode of Laying Down the Lore 40k, a lore podcast in which we aim to separate our Drukhari from our Dark Angels, our Tyranids from our Tau, and our Craft Worlds from our Chaos Marines, and generally ask, what's up with this Warhammer 40k stuff? My name is Ben Crone Barber, and I know pretty much fuck all about 40k. With me is my co-host, Christopher Crowlin Allen.
I'm here.
Who knows absolutely fuck all about 40k.
Yes, very true.
And my dear brother Darren.
The Emperor's blessings upon you all.
Who knows so much about 40k, it's a wonder he has time to do anything else. Over the years, this dichotomy between our levels of understanding became clear, and this series is an attempt to address that ignorance. Silence.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything this one.
I love a bit of ignorance in the morning. Yummy.
That's a terrible thing to call her.
Smells like victory.
Smell my ignorance.
She's a charming woman, but knows nothing about engineering. Yeah.
What's up? What's up?
Oh, I can feel the energy. The energy is so high this morning. Come on, lads. Buck it up. I'm going to be 51 in a couple of weeks. Come on.
And look at you, not a day past 50.
Make the most of it, guys. Make the most of it, because when I hit 51, bam, I am slowing down.
For listeners, if I could describe how I look this morning, it's like I had relations with an electric eel.
Yeah. Do you remember those trolls you get on the end of pencils?
Yeah.
Like one of those that's just had a lot of vigorous sex with an electric eel. Right. I got a feeling that Dar's going to carry this one, Krell. So,
we're all doomed.
Doesn't he always? I mean, what's new?
Pretty much. Crowley, give me some questions. I know you got some questions. I can see it. I can see it on your face. Look how excited you are.
You may say that, but I made the mistake. I kind of glanced over.
You've reviewed the wrong episode, haven't you?
Yeah. I looked at my recap. I was like, 40k episode, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I've got it all there, but I'll just give it a read tomorrow morning. Read it, and it was like, oh, episode 8 recap. Last episode 9. Okay. All right, but here we go. Here's what I remember. Okay, cool. Okay, Ben, what did we look at in episode 9?
Fuck no. Hold on.
No Googling.
No, I'm not Googling. I remember it all now.
You remember it now that you found my recap on this shared drive?
No, I remember it because I looked at the title of the folder that's got episode 9 on it.
Oh.
So it was about, I just did the artwork for it as well, so I remember. So it was about like the bureaucracy, so all the departmentos, which sounds like a really, really shit mint.
There were 5 parts. What 5 parts were they, Benny?
Okay, so 2 parts vodka, 3 parts... no, so you had the administratum, which was basically an entire department of XL lovers. As Dara said, they are XL end. And then there was... Is the Ecclesiarchy one of them?
No. Yes and no.
Okay, then there was the oh, fuck me. The guys that stop heresy and... not heresy, like Xenos and... What are they called? I was going to say investigators. Inquisitors!
No.
The Inquisitors. You said
they're one of the departments, but no.
No, you said that one of the departments was part of it, though, aren't they? One of the departments?
Yes. Ish, yes.
Ish. Okay, so the Ish department, and then there was some others.
I only remember the RBTs, the like Judge Dreads of each.
That was the other one I was going to say.
Yeah, of each like town, and their buildings, their basic like police station / fortress was always erected in clear view of the governing house. So the local governors would always be reminded that no, is that not right?
No, I'm shaking my head at fucking Ben going boing at the word erection.
Ben and I are always at the mercy of Darren's kind of judgmental looks. Every time he rolls his eyes, did I do wrong? Did I do bad thing?
And I've got nothing else to contribute. Oh, was the Navigators one of the departments?
The Navigators was included in the episode, but it's not strictly one of the departments.
Okay, yes. because there was the whole third eye jam. I remember that.
Well, in your episode 9 blurb recap, Darren, you said the Navigators is indeed one of the 5 bureaucratic agencies / parts / segments / whatever.
Yeah, it's one of the 5 bureaucratic agencies that we covered in the episode.
Mm, mm, mm,
Mm, mm,
mm, mm-hmm.
mm,
Mm-hmm.
Is it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Agreed. I concur.
And then
Who was the 5th?
There was the Adeptus Terra, the Astronomicon, the Navigators, the Rogue Traders, and the Adeptus Arbites, or Arbites, if you want to pronounce it phonetically.
The Astronomicon. Yeah, so the Astronomicon was the one that we missed, right?
So that's in order, the ones that manage the bureaucracy of the Imperium, the ones that communicate the decisions or requests for help, the kind of merchant vessels, the merchant trader fleets, the navigators, who are the ones that can see the Astronomicon, which is the kind of, how would you describe it? It's really like a zombie lighthouse.
A zombie.
If you can imagine such an erection. And then the Arbites that enforce all the laws, the many confusing, contradictory laws of the Imperium. And as Chris pointed out, they are front and center on every planet so that the governor can remember in whose name
Who the boss?
Who the boss. And what was that law that the Arbites were able to kind of punish people for? It's like, it was really, really abstract. It was like, if you've tried to do something that isn't covered by the law or something like that, it was like a loophole.
This is the law, and if you do anything that isn't stated in the law, it's also against the law.
Yeah, exactly. It's like abstractionism or something he called it.
Yeah.
Is that what?
Yeah.
Schrodinger's law.
you are both legal and illegal at the same time.
Yeah, until I open this door, and then you're definitely illegal.
Well, that was a terrible recap.
Okay. Any bonus questions, Crow?
Okay, what are we doing this episode, in episode 10, Ben?
and let me just say, we're not doing one of them.
I think it has something to do with churches. Only because Dara said it. Is it the Ecclesiarchy? Oh my god, is it Battle Sisters?
It's the Ecclesiarchy and the Battle Sisters. Those are the 2 we're going to cover today.
I hear their theme music is amazing.
Blam, 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 blam.
I'd like to think that they're like, so they're holier than thou. They're doing it in the name of the emperor, who's seen as a god. You might think that it's, I don't know, like kind of classically choral or dramatic Wagner type music. I like to think it's kind of like gospel-y, real upbeat gospel-y. Testify!
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of clapping. Yeah.
Lots of screaming.
I think we're going to be massively disappointed, Kral.
Yeah.
Well, you are alive in this day and age, so maybe.
Right. Dari.
Right, Ben, strap yourselves in.
What?
Darren's going to take us to warp speed and journey through the story that is Space Church.
Space Church. I'm going to go on for a while.
On the back of the head.
Church.
This is a long echo.
I'm in a loop.
Someone turn him off and on again.
Oh, that happened years ago, mate. So yes, as the lads have intimated, we are going to be talking about in broad quotes, the faithful institutions, those that deal with faith in terms of its management, but also of its enforcement. So again, we'll caveat all of this with, this is a summary. There are going to be so many holes in this, it'll look like the worst Swiss cheese. So really what we're looking at is the institutions that venerate the empire as a god, which, if you'll recall our summary of the Horus Heresy, including the Great Crusade, that isn't at all what the emperor wanted. He wanted a secular Imperium of Man, devoid of any need to contact the warp and the malign entities that existed in it.
That's what he wanted, but what did he get?
He got a speedboat, like on Bullseye.
I love that.
Do you want to see what you could have won? I always love that. Was always my favorite part. Is the people lose and they look dejected, and he goes, "Do you want to see what you could have won? You fucking losers."
What can I just ask? His plan. So he didn't want anybody to be religious. He wanted a secular society.
Yes,
Because he didn't want anybody to use the warp. Would people still have used the warp if he had announced himself as their god? Because he was in corporeal space. So surely all of that worship then would have been, away from the warp.
Are you kind of thinking of like, when you tell someone not to think of a black cat, what do? They think of a black cat. It's kind of self-prophesizing.
I'm thinking of a black cat right now.
There you go. Yeah.
Was that his plan? Is that what you're saying? Is that was his plan? He was just like, no, I'm not a god. I'm a god. I don't know what you're talking about.
But if I was,
but if I was, I'd look a lot like this.
However it is, I'm appearing to you right now because I don't know how I'm appearing to you.
Yeah.
like a god would. Huh?
Yeah.
Jesus, I know we've been working here for a couple of weeks now, but Jim's really distracting with that glowing halo around his head. I'm just a common labourer. I mean, fair enough, I can pick up a building in each hand, but I'm not a god.
Yeah.
How distracting would that be if you introduced yourself to someone and go, "Hi, I'm Darren, not a god."
I don't know, do it on your next social encounter. Let us know how it goes.
So what's the deal? Like, why did he feel that denouncing, I don't know if that's the correct term, if he denounced himself as a god, why would that stop people using the warp?
It really comes down to a kind of level above that, where he wanted to get rid of the need for the warp, the need to contact the warp as such. So as we've mentioned previously, his plan was to get access and control of the webway, the realm within the warp that was created by the old ones. The difficulty he had is that a lot of the communication and a lot of the travel required contact with the warp, either sending messages through it, like some sort of angry telephone network, or traveling through it in ships protected by the aforementioned Geller fields. This all attracted the attention of the demonic entities that were in the warp. And given that the warp is where souls come from, it was really going to be an uphill battle. But he wanted to get to a point where humanity would just scoff at religion and scoff at spirituality and be led by a functionally immortal emperor who was able to manifest powers that would be godlike, but absolutely not a god, even though they do look like a god.
Tastes like a god. It smells like a god. But boy, it ain't a god.
It's a duck.
If it swims like a god and quacks like a god, it's a god.
Did you say he wanted to turn it into a phone line?
No, his communication, the astropaths, when they're sending their signals, which are dreams and omens sent from one astropath and to another, collected by that signal, that message travels.
I'll tell you what,
through
Darren,
the warp.
with your headset and mouthpiece, you do look like someone who could be in the Webway call center right now. Of course, in the future, it will all be automated as well. Like, it's all going to be automated and like, if you want to get through to the Emperor, press 1.
If you wish to converse in High Gothic, press 3.
Is that why they transmit signals in like dreams and allegory, so that it's, like if a demon picks it up and it travels through the warp and a demon goes, "Oh, look, a message from humanity. Let's have a look at what's inside." And it's like the owl flew to the trees. Like, what the fuck does that mean? What can I do with that information? Was it
fake message?
Is it like fake news? Get rid of it. Is that why they do it, or is it just because?
That's how a signal is sent. That's how the astropaths have been trained to send signals. They don't send signals in the kind of raw High Gothic or Low Gothic. That tends to not travel very far. within the warp. So, but powerful kind of emotive imagery is stronger, and that punches through the warp to get to the targeted astropath, be it on another planet, on a ship, or on Terra itself as part of the Astronomicon. That's not to say that it's perfectly translated at the other end.
Yeah, it's like a Chinese whispers sort of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or whispers, as it's called, you racist. And really, around that time, around when the Emperor was walking among his followers, secular followers, that's really when the imperial kind of love affair with religion, with regards to the Emperor, began. It started really in the Great Crusade as these, what's referred to as iterators. These were the people who were in charge of transmitting, communicating the kind of imperial message, the kind of hopes and dreams of humanity, the plans of the Emperor. And as they were dealing, some directly with the Emperor himself, they came to kind of understand his, for want of a better word, divinity. He is the strongest psyker, or second strongest psyker that has ever existed in humanity. He's functionally immortal, being one of these perpetuals that we've mentioned previously, and he's able to manifest powers and abilities that are beyond the kind of capacity of normal people. The biggest champion of his, in terms of recognizing him as a god, or demanding that he be recognized as a god, is the Primarch Lorgar. Now, that's a name, if you've listened to previous episodes, that's the name
Primarch of the Word Bearers.
Of the Word Bearers, Chris. You're fast becoming... God. I think if you keep this up, you're in a real kind of likelihood for formal brotherhood within the Barber family.
Thanks.
You'll be replacing me, of course. I have a question. You said that he was the second most powerful psyker. Who was the most powerful psyker?
Well, I'm not going to answer that right now, am I?
Oh, that's
a little tidbit I'm going to keep in my pocket to reveal at the most devastating moment.
Don't spoil it, listeners. Don't spoil it. Please don't spoil it.
Don't. Whatever you do.
Or our Patreon Discard users. Yeah, no.
Anyway, regardless, it was kind of the potted history for Lorgar's spirituality is whenever the Word Bearers reconquered a planet, or conquered a planet for the first time, they would not just bring the planet into compliance, bring it under the rule of the Imperium. They would stay there and build cathedrals and churches and shrines to the glory of the Emperor. The Emperor took umbrage with this because, for two reasons, really. The first is he didn't want to be recognized as a god, for reasons we've already covered. But also it was the Word Bearers were the slowest legion. They were the legion that took the longest to make any kind of gains of significant size in the Great Crusade. And so they were chastised at Monarchia by the Emperor and by the Ultramarines Legion, which led to Rabuti Gilliman punching Lorgar in the face, knocking him to the ground in front of his entire legion.
Slapped him upside the head. Bitch, sit down. So Lorgar and the Ward Bearers, they're too slow and they're too religious. Well, they're religious, full stop. That's the thing. I mean, blame the parenting. Isn't that down to the Emperor's upbringing? Like he said, look, I need you to be progressive and take over planets quickly and no worship. So what did he do? None of that.
It's the black cat syndrome again, isn't it? He's like, don't think of a pink elephant. It's like, okay, I'll worship you as a god.
What went wrong? I blame the parenting.
And is it? Can I contribute something to that? You know how you were saying that the Primarch's personality was developed in large part by the planet they landed on? Was that the case for Lorgar?
Absolutely, or to use another phrase, 100%. There is also an aspect, I think we've talked about this when we were talking about the kind of run-up to the Great Crusade, the Primarch project. When the Emperor created the Primarchs for the 20 legions, they were viewed as tools, not socially, but used as a weapon or an instrument of change. Some of them were knobs. So he didn't view them as his sons for the large part. And kind of, it was a very perfunctory form of parenting where you had a lot of the...
They were his pets.
Yeah. A lot of the brothers were, sought solace and affirmation from each other, and that led to some alliances being made that would come to be regrettable. There was very little guidance given by the Emperor other than chastisement, as Lorgar himself felt. So, there's also the idea that they were corrupted as they were spread through the galaxy by the forces of chaos. And as Ben says, they were heavily influenced by the planet they grew up on. And in Lorgar's case, it was a planet racked with religious wars again and again and again. Mr. Chris.
And I'm right in remembering that the Primarchs ended up on their respective planets because the Chaos Gods scattered them on purpose for that. So
yes,
it wasn't the Emperor's intention to put Lorgar on that slow religious planet. It was a result of the Chaos Gods meddling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, as a bit of a teaser, that the gods could not have scattered them without the intervention of the first most powerful psyker in human history. Oh. And we're just moving on. We're moving on. We're moving on.
Quick, somebody turn Kral off and on again.
Following the events of the Horus Heresy, we see that the Emperor is interred into the Golden Throne, this great device that powers a lot of the kind of more esoteric infrastructure of the Imperium on Terra, on Earth, but also is a life support system where the Emperor is fed very much in the style of Hungry Hippos, with psychers constantly being kind of plugged in as snack packs. Lunchables? Is that a thing?
Juice boxes.
Who knows? Juice boxes. That's more... A lot of religious sects and cults kind of explode onto the scene after this, because the Emperor is seen now as this ever-living entity, institutionalized, literally in an institution within the structure of the Golden Throne and the Imperial Palace itself. He's then there for, up until the current timeline in 40k, so you're looking at 10,000 plus years, or a little over 10,000 plus years, existing as an extremely powerful psychic entity and the de facto head of a church. Not that he really has any say about it, because his job...
Sounds like it's backfired to the Emperor.
Yes.
Massively.
I think it's his acknowledgement of what has happened with a kind of stalemate with the forces of chaos. That's really what the Imperium is. It's like, if anyone's seen that Disney movie Black Hole, it's the Imperium is now on the event horizon of collapse. It's constantly within the end times, the age of revelation for our Christian friends. It's right on the edge of that. And so he has demonstrably embraced the idea of a state religion, of a single galactic religion under the Ecclesiarchy, as an institution, as a psychic, in quotes, institution that's drawing the worship and psychic power generated through faith from the forces of chaos, from the four gods of chaos, into the Imperium itself. So it's really it's the primary instrument that has allowed the Imperium to last for so long. Is the Ecclesiarchy, or as it is known, the Adeptus Ministorum. That's the official name for the Ecclesiarchy in the High Gothic, I think.
You said the Emperor communicates in a form to various people through like tarot cards and visions
Yes.
and all of that stuff. Did at any point, like the initial one where, the initial contact where they started setting up these churches, did he not go, whoa, 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 that wasn't my plan? Don't do that. Like, disband this shit.
Well, that's a great question, because it leads perfectly into what we're going to mention here. And so I will answer your question right now.
Fantastic.
The first couple of thousand years after the Horus Heresy, I mean, if you'll recall when we covered it, it was such a devastating, calamitous event. It really destroyed the Imperium as was. And so they spent 1,000 to 2,000 years simply trying to rebuild what had already existed. You're dealing with warp storms. You've now got pirates and traitor space marines kind of roaming the space lanes. You've got an increase of xenos or alien activity. There is
galactic scrumping.
Galactic scrumping, absolutely.
Petty crime. Yeah.
There's the rise of what's called the Great Beast, which was a fantastically powerful and influential orc warlord who brought the Imperium to its knees something about 1,000 to 1,200 years after the end of the Horus Heresy. How would you describe it? So, like in our own history, whenever there's been a great war, like the Great War, World War I, immediately after World War I, there was such a shortage of, given the kind of gender roles at the time, men to work the fields, that food was, very expensive and couldn't readily be harvested. On top of that, you had the Spanish flu, which killed as many people as it did, or as were killed during the war. So any war has knock-on effects, and one can imagine a galactic-sized war has galactic-sized after effects. With, we're talking where in the Imperium where there's like agri-worlds that would feed an entire sector. Well, if you destroy that agri-world, or it's invaded or captured, how are you going to feed, the other worlds that would normally be fed by it? So you had
corpse starch.
Corpse starch. Exactly right. You are so close to being adopted.
You're definitely his favorite this episode, Crow.
Well, he's certainly the most communicative, Ben. We'll just leave it like that.
I can say more, it'll just be drivel.
But you can imagine like an entire hive planet starving to death, descending into the use of corpse starch or outright cannibalism. They're so weakened by that lack of food then that some alien invaders or a traitor cult can come in and take over. And that then has knock-on effects for other worlds within that sector and around it. So one cannot overstate how devastating the Horus Heresy was to a galactic empire. I think it actually destroyed the Imperium, and then they had to spend 2,000 years, 3,000 years rebuilding it to this thing that treads water.
Are you saying that the Imperium was the Emperor was just too busy guiding humanity in that rebuild to kind of say, like, guys, don't be making any churches?
I think it goes further than that. I think the Emperor became a purely psychic entity. His psyche, his spirit, is bound to his, in quotes, ever-living body, which is basically just a drawer full of bones at this stage. And so he is only able to communicate psychically. And that means that he ends up communicating in, to some extent, omens, visions. And so these are interpreted as acts of faith, or you're receiving a message from the god. This all is then reinforced by the structure of the religious institutions that popped up. There were thousands of these institutions popped up all over the Imperium within 1,200, 2,000 years of the Horus Heresy. The strongest of these, one can imagine these were like mini kind of faithful empires. So you have the Imperium, the bureaucratic Imperium, and over top of that, you have these religious areas where one sect is stronger in a certain sector of the galaxy than in another. But the strongest and most influential was what's referred to as the Temple of the Savior Emperor. That was the name of this
Catchy.
sect. And it was instituted, or rather, it was founded by a member of the Imperial Army who actually fought during the Horus Heresy. It was actually at the Siege of Terra in those final kind of fateful,
He's a
horrific
veteran.
moments. Yeah.
Back in my day, in the Horus Heresy, we didn't have spaceships.
Now, I'm going to mispronounce his name for comic effect. Are you ready? He is actually referred to as Fatty Dickus.
Yes.
His real name is Dickus Fatty.
Fatidicus.
Are you joking?
Fatty Dickus.
Fatty Dickus.
Fatty Dickus.
I'm not sure how you would pronounce that otherwise.
Dicus. Fadicious?
Yeah,
Fatty Dickus. Anyway.
Fatty Dickus.
Fatty Dickus.
Fatty Dickus, who fought, as I say, Fadidicus. We're just going to say it. Biggest Dickus from the life of Brian.
Biggest Dickus.
He hath a wife, you know, in Continentia. Yeah, in Continentia buttocks. But as he was, he was there at the Siege of Terra. He was around those institutions, those buildings, when the Emperor came back, when the Emperor was brought back and interred into the Golden Throne. And as the Emperor went from being a kind of speaking, still interventionist person, albeit chair-bound, to being a spiritual entity.
Was he still speaking when he got put in the chair? Or was
for about 6 months to a year, he was still able to communicate with people, albeit very kind of haltingly, because effectively his throat had been cut by what's referred to as a lightning claw, which is this enormous gauntlet with long swords for fingers that Horus had on his, what arm is that? On his left arm.
Right.
Yeah. No, wait.
It's his right arm, isn't it?
Yeah, his right arm.
Left in the pictures.
Left in the pictures.
Yeah. So in terms of the Emperor's kind of communications with people, after that period, after he was then communicating with them psychically, I'm assuming that it was kind of a lost in translation thing. Like, he might have been like, okay, I need everybody to stop worshipping me. So he sends them like an image of a church burning. And then the churchy people get that and they're like, oh, he says that there's a threat coming. We need to strengthen the churches. Is it that kind of thing where it's like completely misinterpreted?
He's just like, no.
Okay, right, let's try again. 2 churches burning.
Me.
Oh, he's telling us that the threat is really big. Strengthen them more.
Or these churches are beacons of light by being on fire.
He's trying so hard, his darndest. It's like one of his main agendas on his manifesto. No more religion. Bam, religion everywhere. It's like the cornerstone of the Imperium at this point, it sounds like. I mean, what went wrong? He's not done very well, has he, this old emperor?
Yeah.
Poor dude.
So, biggest Dickus dies.
Fatiticus.
He builds up an enormous following among the Imperial Army, which is then renamed the Astra Militarum, but also the Imperial Navy, and a huge number of scribes and adepts amongst the Adeptus Terra. This means that his visions, his holy word, his kind of, for want of a better word, Bible, is spread throughout the galaxy, is spread amongst the Imperium of Man through the military forces and through the kind of bureaucratic network, all originating from Terra. At his passing, he has over 1 billion followers on Terra alone, and and many billions throughout the Segmentum Solar, which is that central area of influence within the Imperium of Man. As they expanded, they came across other sects and other religious institutions, other cults, which were either absorbed or destroyed by pure kind of fanatical religious mobs egged on by imperial officers who were also members of the Temple of the Savior Emperor. By the end of the 32nd millennium, so we're looking now, it's roughly 2,000 years, or a little over 2,000 years from the end of the Horus Heresy. 2/3 of the Imperium are now under the sway, under the kind of religious control of the Temple of the Savior Emperor. The other kind of major exemptions to this are the Space Marines, the chapters of the Space Marines, but also the Adeptus Mechanicus. They worship a being called the Omnissiah, which is this kind of robo-god. And so they are held to some extent in contempt by the religious institutions, even to this day. Even to this day, the kind of current timeline in Warhammer 40k. At the end of this 32nd millennium, they are declared the state religion by the High Lords of Terra. So they are brought into the fold. They're not something that's humored. They are now so powerful and so wealthy and influential, it is easier to bring them into the fold than not. So we see at that stage the death of the Emperor's idea or ideal for the Imperium being a secular society. That is completely destroyed with that one decree, with that kind of adopting it in. And so now there is a state church for the Imperium of Man. This is an enormous expansion of influence within the Imperium of the Adeptus Ministorum, now known as that. Suddenly they're able to raise taxes on shrine worlds. Suddenly they're able to, for want of a better word, raise armies of the faithful and go on crusades. They are a legitimate powerhouse within the Imperium, arguably second only to the Adeptus Terra in terms of influence and numbers of bodies that they can bring to bear on an issue. That is not to say that they are not unchallenged. The largest of the kind of the other third of the Imperium follows something called the Confederation of Light, which is a rival sect, a rival interpretation of the Emperor's life, the Emperor's sacrifice, and his interventionist ways. This leads to a holy war, a huge crusade that absolutely decimates the forces of the Confederation of Light and leaves them only with a few small shrines or a few kind of hidden congregations around the Imperium. And with that, the Ecclesiarchy now gains complete domination of the faith of the Imperium. They are the recognized de facto church with no kind of, no interpretation or reinterpretation of their very strict religious dogma. Mr. Chris.
The Confederation of Light, they were a rival to the official Church of the Imperium of Man. But
Yes.
Were they still imperialists in the sense that they believed in the Emperor and his word? They just interpreted his actions and his beliefs in a different way. They were very much on side with the Emperor.
It's like what Protestants are to Catholics, or
100%. That is literally what I was about to say. Yes, 100%.
Okay.
So they're a variation on a theme, a variation on an idea. That 95% of what they thought matched up with the Ecclesiarchy. The real change, the real difference was that the Confederation of Light believed that church and state should be separate.
Okay.
That it should continue as it is. It shouldn't be recognized as the Imperium's state religion. They should be allowed to develop their own systems. Mr. Chris.
And who did the Emperor back, if any of them? The Ecclesiarchy or the Confederation of Light? Or is he just like, may the strongest win?
It's really the kind of may the strongest win. We're still talking about the, 2,500, 3,000 years after the Horus Heresy. The Imperium is really getting on its feet after that time. I mean, it took them 3,000 years to do what it took the Emperor 250 to 500 years to do prior to that, to get this kind of reunification going within the galaxy. You know, there's it's the Inquisitor War books. It's a trilogy, a series of novels. In one of the scenes, the main character is able to converse with the Emperor directly. Well, again, psychically. But it appears in the novels that the Emperor's psyche has had to be fractured because there's so many moving parts to the Imperium and so many institutions that need his intervention or guidance, that he's broken off bits of his psyche. So this bit deals with the Astronomicon, this bit deals with the Ecclesiarchy, this bit deals with the kind of bureaucracy, this bit deals with the military. And so...
Could he not delegate that? Didn't he have like custodies and officers that could have done that? But they still needed a top tier,
the top
Emperor
tier
style.
Yes, but it's not in terms of the day-to-day management of it. It needs like a psychic battery for that section. The Astronomicon has to be done through a lens of the Emperor's psyche. So it's to do more with the power than it is with his kind of decision-making qualities.
So the you mentioned that the Adeptus Mechanicus, obviously they have a slightly different set of beliefs around the Omnissiah, and that they're kind of held in contention by the official Church of the Imperium. Do they tolerate them because of what the Adeptus Mechanicus provide the Imperium in terms of production?
Ish. They tolerate them because the Adeptus Mechanicus is a part of the Imperium. It's a very kind of odd relationship because they are allied with the Imperium rather than being of the Imperium, if you know what I mean. They're a separate galactic spanning empire, in quotes, but they're so strongly tied to the Emperor, who they saw as a kind of manifestation of the Omnissiah. So they do worship the Emperor as a god. Without getting too blasphemous, it's the relation between the Emperor and the Omnissiah is, one could say it's similar as a relation between Jesus and God in the Christian faith. It's that they are technically one and the same, but one is a kind of manifested avatar of the other.
And because the Mechanicus are, if I'm not wrong, they're responsible for the production of basically all of the ships and arms and tanks and whatever. If they were to just stop, would the Imperium kind of fall apart militarily speaking? And is that kind of their leverage to continue to believe whatever the fuck they want to believe?
Short answer is yes. It's the incredibly esoteric, high tech machineries, but also that the Mechanicum are that specialize in, but also in mass production. So you've got hive worlds like Necromunda or Armageddon do have manufacturing capacity for small arms and for light vehicles, this kind of stuff. But the more kind of high tech,
like the Titans,
that kind of idea, they can only be produced by the Mechanicus, the Adeptus Mechanicus. But you can equip a fairly solid army just with what you're able to produce on a planet. Outside of the influence of the Mechanicus. Did that answer your question?
So basically, because of their kind of integral part in the manufacturing process, they have kind of free reign in terms of their belief system.
I wouldn't say free reign. They're certainly tolerated, but the Ministorum, the Ecclesiarchy, watches them like a hawk, as does the Inquisition. Mr. Chris?
It sounds like they are allowed to worship who and how they want because it ultimately helps the Imperium. If allowing Adeptus Mechanicus to worship their own idol, their own god in their own way, means that the Imperium can ultimately get big badass machines and military might, have at it.
from a bureaucratic and kind of war materials point, yes. But also, you have to keep in mind that the Mechanicus, to some extent, view the Omnissiah and the Emperor as the same thing, which means they worship the Emperor as a manifest god, which is, in a large part, what the Ministorum does, what the Ecclesiarchy does. So it's brothers from different mothers, shall we say.
Yeah.
They are focused at the same god, as it were.
They're like, no. We're all talking about the same guy here. We just call him the Omnissiah.
We've all got the same circuits and pneumatic drills and pumps in as, when you strip the skin back, right?
The same. But you raise also a good point about Space Marines, about the Adepta Astartes. 99.9% of the Space Marine chapters in the Imperium are secular. They do not view the Emperor as a god. They view him as the founder of the Imperium and the father of the Primarchs, from which all Space Marines are descended.
So granddad?
For want of a better term, yes.
Grandpapa Emps.
Grandpapa Emps.
Big Papa P.
Always carries a bag of Werther's originals with him.
And they really do have a kind of adversarial relationship with the force of the Ecclesiarchy. The Ecclesiarchy, to some extent, venerates the Space Marines as the genetic sons of the Emperor. That is how they view them, which means that each Space Marine, to some extent, is a walking, talking icon of Imperial faith, or at least that's how the Ministorum have decided to view individual Space Marines. The Space Marine chapters and the chapter masters, to some extent, ignore the Ecclesiarchy almost its entirety. There are exceptions, of course, including my favorite chapter, the Black Templars, who have swallowed the kind of Ecclesiarchy dogma hook, line, and sinker, and are a religious order of Space Marines on a constant crusade. So they're a fleet-based chapter. So they are in ships traveling through the galaxy, enacting the dogmatic religious will of the Emperor as they divine it. But also they lend assistance to the Ecclesiarchy and the Sisters of Battle and persecute religious wars on an ongoing basis. They are the most famous of the kind of religious chapters. There are others, but we will cover them anon. Really, then, it's business as usual for the next couple of thousand years until we get into the 36th millennium, where a High Lord, Goj Van Dyer, a name that's quite easy to pronounce, who is the master of the administratum. So he's the head of the Adeptus Terra, as it were. In fact, he is the 361st, if memory serves, master of the bureaucracy of the Imperium of Man. He is effectively, in our own world, are you familiar with the Italian family, the Borgias? They are the ones who were the kind of nobility in Renaissance Italy. They took over the papacy. They took over as heads of not only kind of aristocratic families, but also of merchants.
That's where the expression bourgeois came from, isn't it? Bourgeoisie.
I don't know. Maybe.
Oh, okay.
Sounds like it.
We'll cut that because it's probably wrong.
I can't believe it's not bourgeois.
Bougie.
Bougie.
It's very bougie.
He managed to not only seize control of the administratum, but also of the ecclesiarchy. He became the head of both institutions. And power, as power does, corrupted him almost to his DNA. And he instituted what became known as the Reign of Blood, which consisted of huge dogmatic purges of both the ecclesiarchy and the Adeptus Terra, and in fact the populace of Earth itself. He was based on Earth at the time. He fortified the ecclesiarchal palace on Terra, which, just as an interesting passing note, takes up the entirety of the continent of Antarctica. So it's right at the kind of bottom of the, or as we would see it, at the bottom of the planet. That entire thing is one cathedral palace, ruled at the time by Goj Vandire.
There's no land in Antarctica, is it? It's only the Arctic.
No, there's a landmass under the ice.
Okay. I can't remember. No, I think one's all sea or something, or mostly sea. I can't remember which one.
That's the north. That's the Arctic.
That's the Arctic. Antarctic down south.
Down south.
Down south.
That's got a landmass there, son. Yeah.
Okay. Cool,
to be fair, it's under 2 miles of ice, but there we go.
Okay.
Do they have kind of weather control systems on Terra then? Because obviously,
it's an interesting question because there's no water, there's no surface water, and in fact, there are no forests. There's no plant life. It's one city. Everything is one city.
So yes, it sounds like the answer is yes. They must have their own climate control.
They would do, but the atmosphere is so acidic that it has horrific weather. So it gets acid rain, which is actually acid rather than slightly stingy.
It's the kind of place you'd just leave the window open ajar, no more than just a jar.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to open it wide open.
Yeah. For our UK listeners, very much like Fife.
Felf.
Okay.
That's an in-joke for any Scottish business. Oh, don't bring up Felf. No one goes to Felf, as we all know.
Yeah, no.
His purges extend out beyond Terra as he is able to install kind of lackeys and yes people amongst the powerful positions across the entire Imperium. And he eventually declares himself to be above the Emperor. He is now the modern day kind of traitorous Emperor of Man. In that way, he is perhaps more successful than Horus in usurping power from the Emperor.
Wow.
Mr. Chris.
This guy, I'm going to call him Gavin. What's his name?
Goj Vandire.
Goj, he sounds bougie. Gavin, we'll call him. Was he corrupted by chaos at all, or was it just pure power, corruption by power?
Power. He was he
the human
was,
condition. Okay.
Yes, it's one of these things that in 40k it kind of irks me a lot, is that every time someone rebels, it's chaos or a Xenos influence. But
Xenos did it.
Sometimes people are just dicks.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And Gavin was one of them.
He has a dickish name, that's for sure. Goj.
It was a dickish name. This all came to a head when the Fabricator General of the Adeptus Mechanicus, based on Mars, who is one of the High Lords of Terra, managed to rouse up the kind of righteous indignation of the Imperial Senate, the Senatorum Imperialis, and they tried to depose Vandire. And he responded by killing as many of them as he could get his hands on, and then disbanding the Imperial Senate. So then he would rule directly from the Ecclesiarchal Palace at the butt of the world. At this stage, a force of Space Marines was assembled as there was a conclave of Space Marine chapter masters, and they had simply had enough, especially as he was now putting himself above the Emperor, either tacitly within his expansion of power or kind of in a propaganda sense where he was the de facto Emperor. A strike force of Space Marines, including the Imperial Fists from the first founding, the kind of Praetorians of Terra, the ones that organized the defense during the Horus Heresy, and the Black Templars, and a few other chapters, went in, and ultimately he was deposed. That is not to say that it was the Space Marines that did it. We will cover that shortly, but nor were the Space Marines the only ones rebelling. You had a preacher named of Sebastian Thor, who came from one of the remaining conclaves of the Confederation of Light, and he led a great crusade. And ultimately, as Goj Vandire was executed, Sebastian Thor was brought into the room, brought into the ecclesiarchal palace, and the chapter master, I believe, of the Imperial Fists said, "You are leaving this room as the ecclesiarch, or you are not leaving this room at all."
I quite like this room. I'll stay here.
And so he then became the ecclesiarch and instituted several changes, several
Did that mean that he had to
alterations.
renounce his membership in the foundation?
No, he was able to fold in some of those beliefs through new decrees to help put some distance between the ecclesiarchy and the administratum. That's not to say that they are not still heavily linked and that there are issues from time to time, but they got rid of the capacity for one High Lord of Terra to be in charge of state and church. And that was the most crucial of the time.
He organised Christmas dues together, just so that they could, they weren't completely separate.
Yeah, team building exercises every quarter.
Yeah.
In terms of the kind of progression, then it's really you're looking at an embedding of the Adeptus Ministorum under this kind of refined new touchy-feely law. That's a bad phrase to use when talking about churches. And really, there have been, since that time, thousands, if not millions, of crusades. The galaxy is peppered with cathedrals and priests and various types promoting the faith of the Imperium of Man. In terms of structure, it's very, very much like the Catholic Church. There is a head honcho, and then there is a huge hierarchy of priests of various levels.
Pyramid scheme.
Each with their own purview, each with their own responsibility. So at the top you have the ecclesiarch, who is Space Pope, and also a High Lord of Terra. Under that, you then have cardinals and archcardinals. These are the ones that manage entire segmentum or large sectors within each segmentum. And they are responsible for not only the faith, but the security of the faithful within those areas of the Imperium. As you go down the kind of rung of hierarchy, you go through like deacons and archdeacons. These will be ones that will be given control or management. They are responsible for the faith of an entire system, so a planetary system or a large hive world, that kind of idea. And as you go further down, you get down to the very bottom where you have confessors and preachers. So confessors would be, there's some extent they're peripatetic. They walk around the Imperium very much in kind of a missionary position. No? Please yourselves. And the
it's very hard to walk around like that.
A confessor, wheelbarrows, then the wheelbarrow. The confessor, as an example, would be in charge of an entire hive on a hive planet. So you're looking at 1 billion souls under their kind of management, under their protection, but also under their vigilance. This is a thing where because the Imperium is constantly under threat, the church is constantly vigilant. So they are invasive into people's day-to-day lives. And using the hive world, or a hive as an example, where the day-to-day life of most of humanity is just constant toil or restless sleep. There's no downtime other than praying, other than attending church. So they go to 1 or 2 services a day. And in those churches, in those shrines and cathedrals, you find that the priests keep an eye on the congregation, making sure that someone's not praying for too long, because they think they might be just trying to have a bit of a rest. one of the punishments, if a priest judges you to be kind of lollygagging in church, you're praying but not really, you just don't want to go back to work, you can be sent to a penal legion for the rest of your life. You can be a prisoner soldier until the day you die, simply by attending church a bit too regularly, being perhaps a bit too fervent.
It reminds me of a line from that Bleak Expectations radio play where they're in a kind of workhouse, and he said, we had to work for 23 hours a day, and in the remaining hour we had to eat, sleep, and do 59 minutes of prayer.
So one can imagine a kind of fairly prosaic structure of church people who minister to the faithful from the very basic level up to advisors to governors and to military campaigns, this kind of idea. You do have some kind of specialty ranks within there, and there are as many now as there are stars in the sky. But just to give you an idea, you have exorcists who specialize in getting rid of pesky demons. You have crusaders who are kind of knight errants in the kind of old style. They look very much like an Arthurian knight, but in kind of more technologically based or technologically enhanced armor. Space helmet. You have something called the Iron Evangelists. These are priests and confessors who are assigned to one of the many ships of the Imperium. So they are space-based, as it were. So they are space churches.
Whoa.
Space, baby.
And then you have what's referred
Meg
to
sat
as...
on your lap? I just saw a little dog face just peer up.
It's not Meg. It's Timmy.
Oh, it's Timmy.
Timmy. We're looking after Timmy for a couple of weeks.
And then finally, I just want to touch on something called the Redemptionists. Now, these are a fanatic's fanatic in terms of their religious fervor and belief. These are the ones at the forefront of every single crusade. If they suspect you of heresy, they'll set you on fire, either individually or in large groups. They are wielded by the Ecclesiarchy with kind of kid gloves, because if you drop a handful of these kind of fanatical priests into a city or a planet, you can guarantee that within a few years, a significant portion of that planet will be on fire, with the associated populace in there. They have a zero tolerance kind of idea of worship. You're either as faithful as they demand you be, or you're on fire.
Why is everyone such a ball breaker?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But you can actually, in a game called Necromunda, you can play a redemptionist cult. So you can, have a gang of these guys, and they have, if you can imagine, a standard kind of machine gun or an assault rifle, but it has underneath it disposable flamethrowers. So
nice.
It's just, they'll shoot you and then set you on fire. Or they'll set you on fire and then not shoot you and leave you burn.
But one way or another, fire.
But one way or another, fire. As part of the kind of rebranding of the church, when Sebastian Thor took over, there was a thing created called the Decree Passive, which stated that the church can no longer have men under arms, which meant that they could not have a standing army. That was the spirit of the instruction, because that was a huge problem under Van Dyer's reign of blood. He had literal armies of troops dedicated to killing his enemies, and thus...
That's what troops are there for, right? Like, well, that's what you have troops. I have soldiers ready just for battle. Well, bravo.
A load of troops. He had the 7th Knitting Regiment. He had the...
Look at my army. Guess what they do?
Yeah. But these were armies at his beck and call, rather than armies under the military command of the other High Lords of Terror, including the kind of Field Marshal of the Imperium. This decree passive resulted in really the Ecclesiarchy having three kind of main types of troops, all fanatical, only one truly human. You had the Fraterus Militia, which is the kind of congregation, the general congregation of the church. Some of them can be armed with kind of pistols and small arms to be able to fight. So think kind of a mob with torches and pitchforks. That's the kind of level of expertise we're talking about. So it's guys that run out into the street and just start shooting with their eyes closed. This kind of idea.
Spray and pray.
Spray and pray. Exactly right. You have then also what's referred to as the archoflagellants. These are men and women
flagellants weren't cool enough.
who exist under punishment from the church. They have had their arms replaced with what's referred to as electro whips or electro scourges. These look like huge lengths of electrified cable with kind of maces on the end of them.
Jesus Christ.
And they have a special helmet on. They've been, to some extent, lobotomized, and they've been given a trigger word. And upon receiving that trigger word, the syringes that line their spine, either side of their spine, depress and put in, how would you describe it? Effectively, a mix of every upper you can imagine. And they go into psychotic rages and just sprint as fast as they can towards the enemy, just like whipping them with their chains, flailing. Yeah. There are many hundreds of thousands of these on every kind of system that's held under ecclesiarchal rule, and these are usually just cannon fodder. They're just thrown at the enemy, but they are all punished imperial citizens. They all started out as faithful members of the Imperium who went astray. Mr. Chris?
I'm not so sure it's as much the trigger word as it is the cocktail of uppers that makes them go into a rage.
Well, it's the trigger word that makes the syringes inject.
Oh, right. There's not just a button.
No,
you have to like.
Yeah, you would have thought that would have been easier, wouldn't it? Like,
yeah.
No. We'll make it fun because we can make it a fun word. Button's just a button, you know.
Well, I think maybe there is a button and there's a small audio player in their helmet that puts the word in. Because otherwise, you're standing on the top of a castle shouting words at guys. No, not you. Him. Him. Fettuccine.
Beep, hammer time. Good morning, Webway Call Center. How may I direct your call? I'm afraid the Emperor isn't taking calls at the moment, sir. Well, mainly due to the fact he's interred in a golden throne and lacks the physical apparatus to speak, sir. If you'd like to leave a message, we can send this to him using dreams, and you may get a response through tarot cards, a tried and tested method. Would you like to leave a message, sir? Great. I just need a few details from you before we proceed. Your name? Can you spell that for me, please, sir? Fatidicus. Fatidicus? Oh, Fatidicus. My apologies, sir. I think we spoke with your wife before. You're a veteran from the heresy, is that correct? An honor, sir. Thank you for your service. Now, belief system? Okay, you set up a new religion, sir. Name? No, not your name, sir. The name of the religion. Temple of the Savior Emperor, you say? Quite the mouthful. I'm afraid we can only fit 18 characters in the field. How do you feel about Adeptus Ministorum, sir? Great. And how many followers do you have, sir? At least 7, possibly billions, you say? Okay, great. That's your record updated, sir. Now, what is your message? You would like to declare the Temple of the Savior Emperor the state religion? And you would like the Emperor's blessing? I'm afraid that won't be possible, sir, as the Emperor only blesses secular entities. Would you consider a blessing from the High Lords of Terra? Yes, of course, sir. They are very much in the business of ignoring the Emperor's original vision for humanity, and I know they'd be thrilled to hear from you. Wonderful, sir. I'll get this sent off straight away for the 743 counter-signatures, and you can expect to hear back from the High Lords in the next few hundred years. Yes, you will very likely be dead by then, sir. But nobody became the founder of a state religion in their own lifetime now, sir, did they? Indeed. Now, is there anything else I can do for you, sir? Wonderful. Thanks for calling the Webway call center, sir, and you have a great day. Goodbye now. Good morning, Webway call center. How may I address you?
You then have also larger variants of arcoflagellants, which are in fact effectively an arcoflagellate in a machine, in a walker, which is just effectively a large robot that has huge buzzsaws and flamethrowers on the ends of arms.
I have seen these.
And they batter towards the enemy as fast as they can, surrounded by whatever the Smurf equivalent of them is, the arcoflagellants themselves. So it's really just kind of overwhelming close combat.
Shock and awe.
Shock and awe, yes.
And are these things powered by this flagellant? What is the flagellant conscious in it? Are they guiding the machine, or is it just powered by their pain or whatever?
Conscious but not aware, probably.
Yeah, it's very much like a servitor. In fact, it is a servitor. It's a combat servitor. They have been lobotomized. They retain enough kind of knowledge to be able to run at someone and punch them. But in the punch, they've got all their kind of whips and electrified maces and stuff. And the penitent engines operate under a similar level. So those three kind of troop types are generally the only troops that an ecclesiarchy, a cathedral, or outpost or mission has at their disposal. However, they have skirted around the decree passive by creating the Adepta Sororitas, which are the battle nuns, the sisters of battle. So as you can see, there is a huge hierarchy and organization there that deals with broadcasting the religious dogma, the doctrines of faith within the Imperium. And really, those fall under four kind of headings. The first is what's referred to as the sin of the psyker. We all know from previous episodes that there is a love-hate relationship within the Imperium with psykers. And so the ecclesiarchy, and there are many kind of elements, there are many priests and confessors, they're almost always on the front line. They're the ones seeking out or helping to seek out or forcing the local governors to seek out psykers and to report them and to imprison them and to wait for them to be then collected by the black ships, which bring them back to Terra. So there is a constant kind of propaganda war within the Imperium where the ecclesiarchy is simply trying to terrify the day-to-day citizens of the Imperium about the threat of psykers. And the influence that they can have and how they can control one's mind and one's action unless you are pure within the kind of faith of the church. The second area that they spend a lot of time on is the realm of mutation. And that really falls into kind of two subcategories. So the kind of general mutation of citizens either born with mutations or who develop a mutation due to some malign influence, they are to be hunted down and killed, because they are a sign that there's some element of psychic influence. That is how it's portrayed within the Imperium. And so mutants at best are second-class citizens on certain planets, where on other planets they're just shot on sight and just killed straight away with no consequences for any citizen who does that. The second area within mutation are what's referred to as abhumans. These are the mutations that have stabilized. So these are the space dwarves, the squats, or League
Ogres.
of Votan as they're referred to, the ogrins, exactly right, but also the beast men. Some regiments, some Imperial Guard regiments, use entire companies or battalions of beast men herded together that then are just, much like the arco-flagellants, just thrown at the enemy as cannon fodder. As I say, the church sort of recognizes them as an element of humanity, but one that has been corrupted. So they themselves are second-class citizens compared to day-to-day, in quotes, normal humans within the Imperium.
I like how you described the Beastmen as being herded together. I just imagine like one man and his dog episode, herding a flock of Beastmen. Come by. Watch on.
What's the collective term for a group of beastmen, Chris?
It
herd?
is... No, that's too obvious. It's
it's a growl.
It's
a growl of beastmen.
Yeah, let's go with that. A growl of beastmen.
A growl of beastmen.
Excellent. A roar of beastmen.
And they're led by several priests, or as the collective noun, a sneer of priests. So those first two, the sin of the Psyker and the sin of mutation, those are internal to humanity. These are things that come from humans that have been corrupted by some element, but it's still a thing that is seen as inherent in any human, as any human can suddenly become a Psyker. Any human can suddenly be mutated. The other two really then are external forces. You've got the aliens, so Xenos. In general, it's shoot on sight for any Xenos that a law-abiding, faithful member of the Imperium comes across, if you'll excuse the phrase. There are some exceptions to that, but in general, that's due to a military campaign, an ongoing military campaign where, say, for instance, the Imperium is allied with the Eldar, or the Eldari, as they are now known, for a specific campaign. The Church will advise people to be wary, but not to assault them, because they are helping us fight a bigger bad. And then finally, the other one of those kind of two external influences is the bigger bad. It's heresy and chaos. Those are the main enemies of the church. They're the ones that get the blood boiling fastest. So anyone who denies the divinity of the emperor, even tangentially, even through actions, even through associations, they're either executed publicly, very gruesomely, or they are turned into an arco-flagellant. And so they have a continuous kind of resource pool of heretics to transform into war machines to fight other heretics. Mr. Chris?
I feel like chaos is heresy inherently. Like chaos and the Emperor do not get on anyway. We know this, don't we? Because apparently the Emperor tried to strike a deal, but then basically
screwed them out of it. Yep.
Screwed them out of it. So by default, chaos is heresy. So yeah, heresy is kind of the overall sin, the overall big bad.
Yeah. Well, I think that the as I say, the first two, the sin of the Psyker and the sin of mutation, they are pitched by the Ministorum as being the original sin, something that's in all of us, and thus we have to be ever vigilant and you have to pray. Where in reality, with the exception of aliens, everything is coming from the influence of the warp, the one thing the Emperor was trying to stop. So the church has now taken up that role, but has done so with a view of using the emperor as a religious figurehead, and then bringing that, to bear within the Imperium. And how those are combated is what we're going to deal with next. We'll just have a quick look at the types of soldiery and weapons that are available to the Ecclesiarchy. That is the end of that section.
Nicely rounded up.
Finny.
That's what you did there.
We head into then the Fraterus Militia, the Arcoflagellants, and the Penitent Engines. And now we're going to talk about the Sisters of Battle.
Yes.
Sisters!
Hold on, let me get my lube.
So the decree passive mandated that there could not be any men under arms. And the goal of that decree was that the Ecclesiarchy could not have any troops whatsoever. However, there was something called the Convocation of Nephilim, where the Inquisition agreed to have the Sisters of Battle be available to them as the kind of Chambers militant, the militant wing, the military wing of the Inquisition, not only of the Inquisition, but of the Ecclesiarchy, the Adeptus Ministorum. That happened after the Reign of Blood with Goj Vandire. So we had said that there was a Space Marine strike force that had gone to get Vandire at the Ecclesiarchal Palace in Antarctica. When they arrived, they expected only to find the Fraterus Militia, known at that time as the Fraterus Templar, which these are the regiments completely loyal to Vandire and his dogma. When they got there, they were confronted by female warriors in power armor wielding the same weapon that they had. They were wielding bolters. And they had a fanatical faith in the emperor, which had been corrupted then by Vandire. So they viewed him as an avatar of the emperor, for all intents and purposes. So as the Space Marines were making their way through, they were ground to a halt with the sheer level of fanaticism and firepower that was directed at them. This ended up with a months-long siege, a months-long stalemate within the Ecclesiarchal Palace. All the while, Vandire was going more and more insane and power-mad. He couldn't believe the temerity of these Space Marines that were coming to depose him. The siege was eventually broken by a single member of the Adeptus Custodes. These are the gold armor-clad giant warrior men of the Emperor's own bodyguard. He appeared as if from nowhere in the Ecclesiarchal Palace. The Custodes know every pathway within the surface and subsurface of Terra because they have to defend every single section of Terra and their master's kind of safety and master's presence. They appeared before a warrior called Alicia Dominica and her kind of most trusted companions. And these were the bodyguard of Goj Vandire, who happened to be in the very next room. So this Custodes, Centurion Longinus...
Sorry, what now?
Excuse you?
A century-long
it's a name.
Ginus.
Longina.
Longina.
Wow,
that is
Longinus.
That is a huge bitch.
that is a very long name. Yes. He informed the bodyguard, Alicia and her companions, that they were requested to come into the very presence of the emperor at the Golden Throne. They were granted an audience. So they were taken from Antarctica through to the Himalayas. One assumes it took 2 or 3 hours to get there through the various pathways and corridors.
Straight through the velvet rope, bounces land through. And everyone in the line was like, oh, tutting. How come they get through and we can't get through?
They had the audience, but no one knows what occurred. No one knows what passed between the emperor or indeed the Custodes, the emperor, and the Daughters of the Emperor. That was the name of that military unit at the time.
They just came out giggling.
They came-
Oh, we can't say. We're not allowed. Oh my god.
Quite the opposite, in fact. They emerged from the audience filled with righteous indignation. Indignation? Is that a word? Righteous indignation and anger.
Indignation.
They had Longinus. They had fury in their eyes.
They had long in the ginus, and
they were long of the joiners.
No, that's not going in.
No, it's long from the ginus.
When Alicia and her companions arrived back into the presence of Gauge Vandire, they basically kicked open the door, denounced him as a heretic, and then beheaded him.
Nice.
Just before he was beheaded, as the death sentence was announced by Alicia herself, Vandire famously said, "I don't have time to die. I'm too busy." I've added the bit.
For real? Did he say that?
Yeah. So it was after that the convocation of the Nephilim, or convocation of Nephilim, was brought into position. The Daughters of the Emperor were renamed the Adepta Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle, and the decree passive was put in place. So we now have a link between the Ecclesiarchy, the Inquisition. The Ecclesiarchy now has a standing army of female warriors, backed up by fanatical mobs and robo-mincers. And we settle into the kind of the long 4 millennia from that time to the current time, where very much stagnant is the wrong word. The template for how the Ecclesiarchy manifests has been established within that meeting.
So they got their militia. They got it, even though they said, no, we don't have no standing army. But they got one.
But it's seen as they've gotten around the word of the law by ignoring the spirit of the law, by the spirit of the decree.
Oh yeah, we've been here before, haven't we? Ignoring the idea of the spirit, of the concept, of the law, of the so on and so forth. Sorry, you lost me.
I guess the
one,
emperor didn't want religion at all, and then he got a galaxy full of religions. So, what are you going to do? Yeah.
I'm assuming that we're going to look into the Adepta Sororitas more later, but in terms of the origin of the Daughters of the Emperor, did they come about? Because obviously the Space Marines arriving at the Antarctic
the Ecclesiarchal Palace,
cathedral, the Ecclesiarchal Palace, they didn't know that these warriors existed.
Yes, that's true.
They were kind of surprised.
They were surprised by them.
So were they developed at the same time as these, like the arcoflagellants and whatnot?
It's something we'll explore in more detail when we do dedicated episodes to the Sisters of Battle, but they did exist in some form before Vandire kind of came to prominence, but they were nowhere near as well equipped as they became. It's the money and the influence that Vandire was able to kind of bring to bear is what brought them to that level. And to some extent, the Daughters of the Empire still are the Sisters of Battle. There's not really been any huge technological advancements or organizational advancements outside of the kind of bringing them into a kind of unified single entity.
Daughters of the Empire.
Daughters of the Emperor. Sorry, yes, it's Vlad and Manfred all over again.
Is there a kind of a base level of like shame within the Adepta Sororitas regarding what happened? The fact that they were kind of brainwashed, by that individual, whatever his name was, Vandire. Gash
Nagash. What? Gash Nagash. One assumes that at the time there must have been, but these are, effectively warriors without peer, without being super augmented super troopers. These are some of the finest warriors within the Imperium of Man. So they will have their own kind of views on these things, but in general, no, there's not there's no original sin, if you see what I mean. They're not viewed as less than.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
So the Sisters of Battle, in the game, they are broken into certain orders, being kind of organizational units or armies, in quotes, regiments, I suppose is another way of looking at them. There's kind of 6 major orders, each one founded by Alicia and one of the companions, who have since received sainthood. And we'll talk about that in a little while. But it's important to bear in mind that the Adepta Sororitas is one entity. It's not broken up like the Space Marine chapters, and that's a comparison that's made perhaps a bit too much. A lot of people view them as female Space Marines, where they're absolutely not. They are certainly augmented to be able to use power armor, and they have a bolt gun, but they don't go through a kind of rigorous kind of biological enhancement as the Space Marines do. The individual sisters are, for the vast majority of them, are raised in the school of Progenium. We talked about that before, which is where the kind of orphans of the good and the great of the Empire, of the Imperium, go, and are raised and trained by the kind of military advisors and scholars, but also by what's referred to as drill abbots, who are the kind of a military religious school teacher, and they're the ones that kind of indoctrinate them into the imperial creed. Once identified as perhaps a suitable candidate for the sororitas, usually identified by a drill abbess, it's important to note that at no stage from recruitment through to deployment is any male influence felt outside of the emperor. They are a completely segregated organization. So even the selection process is done by women who, in general, are former battle sisters or who are female priests within the Ecclesiarchy, as it's kind of bound into the decree passive that you can have no men under arms, sort of implies you can have no men deciding who is under arms either. Mr. Chris?
Seeing as the Sisters of Battle are kind of autonomous and not influenced by male input at all, is their working environment, as it were, is the way they are, is it different? The Imperium of Man is very oppressive and tyrannical and authoritarian. Do they behave inherently in the same way regardless?
Yes, they behave exactly in the same way.
Yeah.
They are effectively nuns in terms of how we would conceptualize them, but they are militant nuns. These are nuns that take to the battlefield. They are,
as opposed to regular happy nuns.
Yeah.
With razor-sharp rulers.
Yeah, the ruler-wielding, compassionate, regular nuns, yes. They view themselves as not just defenders of humanity, but defenders of the faithful, defenders of human souls. And so they are incredibly strict. They are incredibly dogmatic because they have to be, because they're facing chaos and heretics and aliens and psychers and mutants almost on a day-to-day basis. There's no downtime. So it's the issue of, if you're in a constant state of war, you're not really going to be gregarious and happy-go-lucky. Once a candidate has been selected, they're sent off to one of the orders. Now, as I said, there are 6 kind of major orders, and those are the Order of the Bloody Rose, Order of the Sacred Rose, as original, Order of Our Martyred Lady. The Martyred Lady, it tends to be the kind of poster child order used by Games Workshop. That very much like the Ultramarines are the poster boys for the Space Marines, the Martyred Lady, the Order of the Martyred Lady are the poster girls, poster women for the Sisters of Battle. You then have the Order of Ebon Chalice, Order of Valorous Heart, and then my favorite, which is the Order of the Argent Shroud. So if I ever get a force going, I'll paint them up like that. As I say, they were each founded by one of the bodyguards, one of the Alicia and her companions. And those original 6 warriors have achieved sainthood. Now, we didn't talk about that earlier when we were talking about the Ecclesiarchy. Saints exist. Saints are manifestly real within the Imperium of Man. These are, in general, extremely faithful people, although not always, members of the Ecclesiarchy, usually, but not always, and they manifest the will of the Emperor in some fashion. That can either be...
But not always.
But no, always. And like the examples range from, Saint Celestine, who is a member of the Order of our Martyred Lady, and who is a kind of winged warrior, well, a jetpack wielding warrior whose jetpack is in the shape of wings. She was killed and then resurrected by the pure spirit of the Emperor. And she now fights at the forefront of these great crusades led by, leading forces of our Martyred Lady.
So she's a living saint.
Forward. She's a living saint. But almost every order has at least one saint in some capacity, either a warrior or a scribe. So a scribe or a messenger who can... with one pamphlet, rouse up the ire of the faithful on a planet led by a heretic. And if that heretic is then deposed and the planet comes back into compliance with the Imperium's kind of requirements, that scribe is held up as a saint because they did what 1,000 warriors could not do. And so they were judged to have had, for a moment, some essence of the Emperor was within them. And that's true for not only Ecclesiarchy, or not only for members of the Ecclesiarchy. There are soldiers who have received sainthood. There are priests, adepts, bureaucrats who have received sainthood because they had done something extraordinary, which had been judged to be the influence of the Emperor. Now, that's not to say that it's done wholesale. They're fairly cynical about it as well. If someone managed to achieve some great act and is viewed as being the Emperor's will was embodied within them for that time, but they also happen to be really unpopular politically within the kind of sector, their sainthood or their beatification, as the process is called, could take centuries rather than be rubber stamped. So there's a kind of political aspect to this as well. So while we have these various orders, they're still all one force. They're not individual Space Marine chapters. That said, they all have their own leadership. So you have the abbesses who lead the various sizes of forces. You have a canoness who is in charge of a single order. And of course, the size of these orders denotes the influence and power of such women in councils and in negotiations. Individual units or individual forces can range in size from a couple of units and a leader up to an entire order, with about 1,000 battle sisters within each kind of area. But that is not to say that an order is limited to 1,000 battle sisters, as Space Marines are limited to 1,000 Space Marines per chapter. Each order, each of the kind of major orders, could be tens of thousands of battle sisters, and in some cases up to 100,000 battle sisters. I'm going no further than that because of the whole millions, billions thing I got in trouble for a few episodes back.
Is there a single leader of the Adepta Sororitas?
No, there's more accounts. Well, technically, yes, it's the Ecclesiarch, because the Adepta Sororitas answers only to the Ecclesiarch. There are two kind of subdivisions within the organization of the sororitas, and those are known as convents. There's the convent prioris, which is on Terra, and then there's the convent sanctorum, which is on Ophelia 7, which is a shrine world. And within each of those convents, three each of the major of the Orders Majoris, the ones I named there, the ones descended from the or founded by the bodyguard of Gojvandar, are there. And then each of those orders has suborders or orders minoris from there. So, you could be looking at an order would have somewhere between 10 and 100 order minoris under there, each comprising of either a handful of battle sisters or 1,000 sisters. And so in its totality, the Adepta Sororitas is a huge force of well-trained, power-armored warriors that can, under certain conditions, stand toe-to-toe against Space Marines.
So is an abbess the top level within one of the orders?
A canoness.
Oh, canoness, right.
Is the top. So an abbess would look after an abbey or a single encampment or fortress monastery that they would look after.
Gotcha. Nice.
The Sisters of Battle are not only preoccupied with making war and defense, although that is the vast majority of their function. There are other orders within the sororitas. The three kind of main groupings are the Hospitallers, which are medics and doctors and nurses. These battle sisters are more preoccupied with healing than with causing injury, although they can fuck shit up as well. But they are routinely associated with the Sisters of Battle when they go to war. In general, they're not of the same order as the forces to which they're assigned, and in some cases they can be assigned to Imperial army regiments to give kind of succor and aid to the kind of forces of the Imperium. You then have the Orders Dialogus? Dialogus? Yes, dialogue. What they are the kind of scribes and translators of the Battle Sisters. So these are the ones that will translate between High Gothic and Low Gothic when handing out, space Bibles. But also some of them have been trained in how to translate alien languages. So these are the researchers and librarians that will allow not only the Sisters of Battle, but any inquisitorial force that they're associated with, access to a significant body of learning and be able to communicate between beings that perhaps don't share the same value system. You then have, finally, the Orders Famulus.
Fabulous.
Fabulous, yeah. No, Famulus.
Fabulous.
They mince around everywhere. Wherever they walk, they vogue.
Yeah.
Just gesticulate.
These are there's no dancing around it. These are the Bene Gesserit of the Imperium of Man. So these are lifted straight from Doom. Cool. These are the teachers and advisors to the noble houses and governors across the Imperium. They get into kind of noble eugenics and tracing family lines and teaching the good and the great how to be better imperial citizens and one of the members of the faithful. They're also the spy network to some extent because they have their fingers in so many pies, if you'll excuse the phrase, that allows them to gather a tremendous amount of intelligence on the nobility of the Imperium. And that's crucial because if one of those proves to be a wrong-un, you could lose an entire planet. to heresy or chaos. And so you can see that they are not just a military wing, not just the military force of the Ecclesiarchy, they are also the kind of intelligence network. They're the primary contact with other agencies through the dialogus, either with the military wing of the Imperium, the general military wing, or the Inquisition. But they also have a huge cadre of healers that they can send out to reinforce the fact that the Emperor is sending these people to you to help you, to keep you alive so that you can fight in his name, and. Yeah, it's a fairly convoluted and quite detailed organization, which I can't wait to delve into in more detail. But what I will say, just it kind of in general, we'll just touch on some of the troops that they have as we close out this episode. In general, you have a battle sister, and a battle sister, the kind of rank and file troop, is equipped with power armor, a bolt gun, and grenades. That's really all she needs, and she will never back down.
And a can-do attitude.
Yeah, a can-do attitude, a can-shoot attitude. Yeah,
I can do anything better than you, and in heels.
Don't get me started on some of the earlier sculpts. There were battle nuns with high heels. It was fucking insane.
That's really
yeah,
awesome.
The only way that that's fair is if they also release Space Marines with high heels. I'm just saying. I'm just putting it out there from an equality perspective.
Quality perspective. So, yeah, they do have a kind of no questions asked, shoot now, shoot later policy in general for any foe they come across.
I can relate.
You then have various kind of progressions from the general kind of awesomeness of a rank and file sister of battle. They can go in kind of several routes. If they're equipped with special weapons like flamethrowers and meltaguns and storm bolters, they're what's referred to as a dominion. And these are always mounted in a Rhino APC, not like a Rhino from one of those Ace Ventura movies. That'd just be fucking weird. Especially deployment.
The Trojan Rhino.
But these are like a fast attack style troop. They are mechanized infantry. You have the Retributors. They are infantry, mechanized or not, that are equipped with the heaviest weapons within the Sororitas arsenal. And that is heavy bolters, multi-meltas, and heavy flamers. So there's a theme here of either blowing stuff up or melting stuff or setting it on fire. That's really how they make war. You have the kind of jump pack equipped troops, which are referred to as the Seraphim, and they go into battle dual wielding pistols or hand flamers, and they will just, they quick draw themselves across the battlefield, peppering. They're John Wicks. Effectively, it's John Wick. John Wick with a jump pack.
Cool.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Doing lots of like sideways bullet time style attacks. Yeah.
And then once you get to the higher ranks where you're a veteran sister of battle or a very well-regarded warrior, you get into the Celestian rank, and these are the veteran infantry units or the bodyguards themselves for the leaders of the force. These are the battle sisters that have seen it all, done it all, and will continue to do it all again as the Ecclesiarchy needs.
They sound chiseled, hardcore. I bet they smoke whilst they eat their dinner, don't they? Like,
oh yeah, constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're so badass that they actually smoke pipes.
Amazing.
Oh, that's not a pipe you're sucking on.
There are some more esoteric units within the Sisters of Battle, and I'm thinking of the Repentia. Now, these are sisters who are judged either to have failed in their faith in some way or have directly contravened an order, this kind of idea. They've made a mistake and they must now atone for it. These sisters are stripped of their armor. They go into battle effectively wrapped in scrolls, which details their transgressions, and they're only armed with a huge double-handed sword that's also a chainsaw. It's called an eviscerator. And they again, much like the arcoflagellants, they race into battle. Now, they do so willingly because they're trying to wash themselves clean of their sin, but they're also...
Kind of like Slayer Dwarves.
Yeah, is it
Yes,
kind of
they're
like
almost
they'll
exactly
only be able to make up for it if they die in battle? Is it?
No, they can, because the Emperor despises the waste of a good warrior. They're led into battle. Well, more correctly, they're whipped into battle by what's referred to as a mistress of repentance. I think I may have got that wrong. And she has 2 electro whips and just whips her fellow sisters, the Repentia, into frenzy. At the end of the battle, she will decide if a given sister has redeemed themselves. And if they have redeemed themselves, they rejoin the rank they had previously, or the type they are, and they're held in great esteem because it's really, they've gained forgiveness from the Emperor. Because every decision technically comes from the Emperor as members of the Ecclesiarchy or the Sororitas view it.
I love the idea that, like, you know, they're stripped of their armor and then they're just clothed in scrolls that detail their sins. It'd be real killer if, like, you did a sin, but it was like, I don't know, you stole an extra portion of food and you're like, well, this isn't going to be a big enough scroll to cover me. Right. In for a penny, in for a pound. And then they just go fucking rampant so that they get, like, they could make a dress, you know, a nice formal dinner jacket or something out of it.
Well, I think they don't care about their own physicality, so that wouldn't be an issue for them. It's interesting to note that on the miniatures, these scrolls are held in with, like, small daggers and nails that are pierced through their skin.
Ooh,
so
wow.
that's how the scrolls are held on.
No tit tape then.
Yeah, and invariably they'll have like a nail through their tongue, or if you'll excuse, on one model it has a ball gag, and they all they want to do is either redeem themselves or die, and so they don't care about the things about, you know, how bad they look. This all is not to say that they are without vehicles as well. We touched on the kind of armoured personnel carrier they have, which is called a Rhino. They have 2 other types of tank, which are quite interesting. One is an immolator, and it's a Rhino, so it's still an armoured personnel carrier, but it's got a huge turret on the top that has an armored stained glass window and 2 flamethrowers, 2 big heavy flamethrowers.
Cool.
And so it brings both beauty and fire to the enemies. And the final one,
how do they see through the stain through glass? Like, it's pretty obscure.
They've got their power armor has a thing called auto senses, which is a thing that's in Space Marine power armor as well, and that links to a little kind of camera in front of everything, so they can see perfectly through it. The final tank, or the final variant, is called an Exorcist. This is
Exorcista.
Exorcista. Oh, I like what you did there.
Not an immolator, a hurlator.
Chris, you're on fire.
Am I? Shit.
The Exorcist is a Rhino chassis that has a rocket launcher on it. Now, this isn't any run-of-the-mill rocket launcher. This rocket launcher looks like an organ that you would find in a church. So it's a musical instrument that a Sister of Battle actually plays.
Amazing.
And depending on the keystrokes, it launches rockets out of the pipes.
Yes. I would totally go to church if that's what organs did.
Now, you say organ, so it could be one of 2 styles. Is it like, you know, classical church style music play through the organ, or is it like Henry Mancini halftime kind of ice hockey?
Oh no, it's the classical huge church organ.
That's amazing. That's so funny.
And on that note, I think we'll draw the discussion of the faithful to a close. Again, this was a potted history or her story of the kind of the view of faith within the Imperium. If you layer this on top of the bureaucracy, so this episode and the previous episode, that is the experience that almost all Imperial citizens have of the Imperium of Man. It's bureaucratic and it's religious. That's it.
Right.
And so, in terms of
Religiously bureaucratic or bureaucratically religious?
yes, exactly right. And at any moment, you can be called upon to fight for your Imperium, either as a member of the military, a member of the Freighterist militia, or a member of Planetary Guard, or as a combat servitor, an archoflagellant for the Ecclesiarchy. It's not much of a life for most people. It's horrifically oppressive. If you can think of the most bureaucratic secular country in the world, plus the most fanatically religious country, and have them be the same country, that kind of gives you an idea of how oppressive life is in the Imperium of Man. And that is viewed as a good thing by the leadership.
Wow.
Of course it is. Yeah,
That's
of course they'd say that.
Thoughts, questions?
It's just ironic how massively religious, how much religion is involved in the whole galaxy, considering the primary aim of the Emperor.
the initial. Yeah.
Yeah, like, right,
It's
no
like
religion.
not just a
okay,
little-
you want religion everywhere. No, that's the opposite of what I just said. I want no religion. Okay, everyone's religious.
So uber religion, yeah? Like, let's really take it to the nth degree.
Yeah. I guess you at that point, you just change the definition of religion. You know what? Yeah, you're not religious. You worship me, but that's not religion. That's bureaucracy. Religion
It's common
is
sense, mate.
not
It's common
worshipping
sense.
me. Yeah.
But this is how far the Ecclesiarchy goes, but the Adeptus Ministorum goes. Every action is viewed as a votive prayer to the Emperor. So everything you do is a prayer that reflects on not only your relationship with the Emperor, but your relationship with his church. So they can effectively nail you to the wall for anything, and that you live under constant fear, unless you are wealthy or have contacts.
And if it's not them, that's that bloody abstractionism law that the RBTs come along. It's like, you think you were Lupo? No, that's against the law, I'm afraid. Oh, you were doing nothing? Also against the law and religion.
But this is the thing that people have to keep in mind when they think about, on a planet over on the other side of the galaxy. Not only do you have the body of law that's been built up on that planet to enforce the status quo, for want of a better interpretation of what laws are, but then you have the complete lex imperialis, the laws of the Imperium by the Arbites, and then the huge body of dogmatic law by the Ecclesiarchy brought in as well. So you're living within three extremely oppressive legal systems, all of which want you just to shut up and do your job.
Yeah.
Wow.
Heavy duty, man.
Yeah. Man.
I love the Adepta Sororitas, man. I can't wait to hear a little bit more about them. Like, I'm torn between them, the White Scars, and the Eldar. I still don't know who's my fave out of those. Although I suppose it could all be faves. One's favorite Xenos, one is favorite Space Marine, and then one is just the Adepta Sororitas.
Yeah.
I need to get more acquainted with the different factions and outfits and military to decide which one I like. I'm not acquainted with them enough.
It's just the orcs, Chris.
Yeah, true. Touche. Yeah.
It's always the orcs.
The boys.
Always the orcs
The
with
boys.
you.
Yep,
the boys.
Yep.
Nice. Shall I wrap up?
Yes, you may wrap up.
All right, that's all from us. Thank you so much for listening. Details and imagery for the topics we've discussed in this podcast can be found on our website at layingdownthelore.com. We also have all our previous episodes on there, release schedules, merchandise, and you can sign up for the Laying Down the Lore newsletter, which includes exclusive info about upcoming releases, behind the scenes chat, and some extra lore not covered in the podcast.
Does it though?
If you a little bit. If you've enjoyed what you've heard in this episode and want to If you've enjoyed what you've heard in this episode and want to support us, head over to patreon.com/laying down the lore 40k and sign up today for as little as £3. This will give you access to our Discord server where you can come and tell us exactly what you think of Kral and his love of orcs. We'll...
Sorry, they can't hear me smile.
Yeah.
I'm smiling.
We'll be back again soon displaying just how little Chris and I know. Until then, goodbye.
Ciao for now.
Go in the name of the God Emperor.